The rocket that's supposed to take humanity back to the moon and eventually to Mars will be canceled after just 3 flights. 3! Before it ever lands on the moon? And here's the strangest part. When they first built it, there was no mission. They built the rocket first, then tried to figure out what to do with it. In 1969, NASA told the president we'd be on Mars by 1981. In 2016, Elon Musk promised 2022. Then he said 2026 for certain this time. For over half a century, Mars has always been just 10 years away. And somehow, we keep believing it. After 54 years, 4 astronauts are heading back to the moon. It should be the most exciting moment in space history, but almost no one seems to care, not even in America. This is the story of the Artemis mission and why humanity's greatest space project feels so strangely empty. We don't remember, of course. Our parents don't remember either. Depending on your age, maybe even their parents don't remember. But 3 or 4 generations back, our ancestors remember it well. We once went to the moon. The moon. Yes, it has almost become a legend at this point. Faint and uncertain. The moon voyages were something that very few people alive today actually witnessed firsthand. And that's exactly why so many people started to doubt it, to stop believing it ever happened. Did we really go? Are we sure? And if we did, why did we never go back? These wild questions started circling around. And then the time finally came. After exactly 54 years, with the Artemis 2 mission, humanity is heading back to visit the moon, even though we won't be stepping on it just yet. We'll take a look and come back. It will be a preparation for the next crucial phase, but it will be crewed. Humans on board. 4 astronauts will travel beyond the distance covered during the Apollo missions, reaching the farthest point any human has ever traveled from Earth orbit. A new record. It will remind us of that old memory once again. Of course, as you probably know, the Artemis mission is not just about the moon. Yes, in the next phase, we'll land on the moon, but it will only be a temporary base for us. Our real destination is Mars. This is the first step of the historic mission that could make us an interplanetary species. After countless delays, and assuming there isn't yet another one, this step will be taken sometime between March 6th and 11th. If you think about it, this might be the most important mission in the history of humanity, science, and space exploration combined. This isn't some new iPhone launch that's lost its novelty. This is a genuinely massive project sitting right in front of us. In every sense, this is a far bigger deal than Apollo ever was. But if you've been paying attention, doesn't something feel off? It's like people just aren't as excited as they should be. You might think, well, it's not our country sending them, so why should we be excited? Setting aside the scientific thrill of it all. But trust me, it's the same everywhere in the world, and even in America itself. The Artemis project is passing by remarkably quietly. The excitement they hoped for just never materialized, and there are very good reasons for that. I'm going to walk you through all of it in detail, so sit back and get comfortable. Today, we'll talk some politics, plenty of history, and a whole lot about the moon. We'll also face some hard truths. Let's get started. Now, Let's start with a date that everyone talking about the Artemis mission keeps missing. The Artemis mission was officially announced by NASA in 2017 as part of the American government's Space Policy Directive. The core objective was to establish a base on the Moon and prepare the groundwork for the real goal, Mars. The original targets were around 2020 for Artemis 1, the uncrewed test, and around 2022 for Artemis 2, the crewed lunar orbit mission. That's the flight we're talking about right now. And Artemis 3, the actual moon landing, was planned for 2024. Then the pandemic hit and everything slipped. You might think all these delays are just normal, but the real story is something else entirely. It goes all the way back to 2004, to George W. Bush. And that's one of the core reasons behind the lack of excitement today. There's a deep fatigue in this story. But that's not even the main reason. In 2004, George Bush came out and said, "The shuttle is retiring. We're building a new spacecraft to replace it. The Crew Exploration Vehicle." The plan was clear. Fly by 2008, start crewed missions by 2014, return to the Moon by 2020, and in the long run, Mars by the 2030s. NASA took that vision, expanded it, and called it Constellation. The Constellation program. They even designed 2 rockets, Ares 1 and Ares 5. And the capsule that would carry astronauts was named Orion. NASA Administrator Mike Griffin came out and called it Apollo on steroids, a beefed-up Apollo. He wanted it flying by 2012, but the whole thing started shaking from the very beginning. Because in 2008, Obama won the election. When he took office, he found that the program had only produced a single prototype. The budget had already ballooned past $3.1 billion, and it was at least 3 years behind schedule. On top of that, the promise of returning to the Moon by 2020 was already dead. The Moon landing was pushed all the way to the 2030s. The bottom line from NASA was this: they needed an extra $3 billion a year to make it work. When Congress refused, the Obama administration pulled the plug on Constellation. Some of you might remember things got pretty heated back then. But it wasn't disappointment about not going to the Moon. The problem was this: NASA projects like these provide jobs for thousands of people across America and around the world. The massive production line and supply chain left over from the space shuttle era would go to waste with this decision. Thousands of people would lose their jobs because of it. And in America, that's a very valid reason for public outrage. So the senators, who loved their seats a little too much, said, "Fine, cancel Constellation, but don't make it look canceled, just have NASA pretend to build a rocket." It sounds like a joke, but that's genuinely what happened. The reason didn't matter. Just look like you're building a rocket, keep people employed, and make sure we keep our seats. That was the priority. And as a condition, they were told to use the technology from the famous shuttle program that ran from 1981 to 2011. And that's exactly what happened. The shuttle's technology was essentially recycled. A few parts were taken, some things were added on top. The Orion capsule that had already been developed for Constellation but shelved was brought back in, and out came the SLS. Yes, the giant heavy-lift rocket that's supposed to carry humanity to the Moon and Mars, the SLS, is essentially a remix. And here's the strangest part. When the SLS was designed, there was no mission. They built the rocket first, and then the race to find it a purpose began.
An asteroid mission was discussed for a while, other moon missions were floated, and while these debates dragged on, Donald Trump took office.
This time, a mission was actually set. A name was chosen, Artemis, and the goal was clear. Land at the moon's south pole and build the infrastructure for Mars. So, we're going to Mars. Hooray, right? Well, there are serious problems with this vision too. I'll get to those. But wait, there's another issue first. To go to Mars, we need to build a base on the moon first. And for that, NASA needs an absolutely enormous budget. So what happened? In 2020, the administration allocated just 0.45% of the national budget to NASA. To put that in perspective, the last time NASA received that little funding, it was 1960. Dreams and reality. We have this incredible vision, but are we just fantasizing about it without actually putting our money where our mouth is? So, not exactly rock solid. We'll go, sure. The government promised, after all. We'll swing by the moon with Artemis 2. Artemis 3 will land on the moon whenever it happens. But the Mars dream feels like it's being propped up by wishful thinking. Rockets, space, the moon, Mars. These are all beautiful topics. But there's value in being honest about them. Take the Mars dream, for example. It's not a new dream at all. Back in 1969, when Nixon took office, NASA presented him with a program. A space station would be built and used as a waypoint for Mars. And by 1981, humanity would have reached Mars. 1981. And that date kept getting pushed back. And not just by NASA. In 2016, Elon Musk said we'd land on Mars by 2022. When asked again in 2020, he said 2026, guaranteed. And here's the ironic part. This idea of just flying to the moon, doing a lap, and coming back was something NASA itself didn't consider sufficient in the past. Because during the Apollo era, a similar test flight was conducted, Apollo 8. It didn't land on the moon either. But here's the crucial difference. Apollo 8 didn't just go, look, and come back. It entered lunar orbit. The critical maneuvers needed for landing missions were tested in real conditions. Approaching the moon is one thing, but entering its gravitational pull, settling into orbit, and then breaking free to return to Earth is something else entirely. That's exactly what Apollo 8 did. Vital steps like entering lunar orbit and firing the engine for the return to Earth were tested in real lunar conditions for the first time. Because if that engine didn't fire correctly, there was no coming back. That's why Apollo 8 wasn't just a flyby mission. It was a full dress rehearsal for the moon landing. Artemis 2, on the other hand, will fly to the moon but only pass by it and come back, a flyby mission. Most of the critical systems needed for future landings won't even be tested on this mission. And that difference inevitably raises a question. If this is supposed to be the first step toward Mars, if it's being called the greatest project in human history, then why are we staying at such a basic level? Apollo 8 was a threshold. Artemis 2 feels like it's being done just for the sake of doing something. Now let's look at the future plan. On paper, everything looks perfect. But let's take a closer look. According to NASA's plan, Artemis 3 will actually land on the moon in 2027, specifically at the South Pole. Because there's ice there, which means water, which means fuel. That's the backbone of any long-term base. After that, the Lunar Gateway will come online, a space station orbiting the moon. Artemis 3 will deliver its first component. Artemis 4 in 2028 will land again and add new modules to Gateway. Artemis 5 in 2030 will test a rover. Artemis 6 in 2031 will test something like a habitat. Artemis 7 in 2032 will try a pressurized rover. So, if you just look at the plan from above, it all seems like a perfectly smooth moon colony scenario. But most of these plans fall into the category of nice to have rather than likely to happen. Because the most critical piece of Artemis is the landing vehicle. For the Artemis 3 landing, SpaceX's massive human landing system was chosen. And for this system to work, it needs multiple fuel transfers in Earth orbit before heading to the moon, not just 1 or 2 rockets. For a single landing, we're talking numbers like 10 to 15 Starship launches. Meanwhile, Orion sits on its own side. It will carry astronauts to the moon on the SLS. Then the astronauts will transfer from Orion to the landing vehicle. That's how the landing happens. A single mission that's basically a logistical nightmare.
And the real breaking point is this. The Starship side is so far behind schedule that in 2025, NASA opened the door for other companies to build alternative landing vehicles.
In other words, they were counting on SpaceX, but they started admitting it might not happen in time. Meanwhile, Blue Origin already secured a separate contract for the Artemis 5 lander. So, there's no clear plan. There are multiple plans. Or rather, not plans, just possibilities. And it's not just the landers. The rockets are all jumbled up too. One moment it's Blue Origin's New Glenn, the next it's SpaceX's Falcon 9, Falcon Heavy, Starship. They're even discussing whether Falcon Heavy could carry Orion to the moon. There's no clear line that says this is NASA's official rocket. Everything is constantly being reshaped. And then the real bombshell drops. Looking at the 2026 budget proposal, there's talk of canceling SLS and Orion entirely. The very backbone of the Artemis program could be shelved before it even fully works, dismissed as too expensive and too late. And they're saying it clearly. SLS and Orion will be canceled after just 3 flights, meaning the whole system could be scrapped right after the first moon landing? So, if you ask what Artemis 2 is even testing at this point, we honestly don't know. If this hardware only has 3 flights in it, then it doesn't feel like we're building a future. Are we just checking off one more mission before closing the book? Let me get to the real problem. NASA's budget proposes an $8 billion increase for the Moon to Mars program. But the total budget isn't growing. So that money has to come from somewhere. Where? Science. Specifically, from space science and planetary missions. For example, the Mars Sample Return mission that's been planned for years is being canceled. We were going to bring samples back from Mars. They're canceling it. The incredible mission to bring back the samples Perseverance already collected is being scrapped. Right at the moment when we're dreaming of sending humans to Mars, we're giving up on the scientific missions that would actually help us understand it. And then there's a leaked document in the background called Project ANA. A document said to have come from the circle of the new administrator, Jared Isaacman. The document talks about NASA's science approach evolving into a science-as-a-service model. And even stranger, it suggests NASA should pull out of climate science entirely. The idea being that the government shouldn't collect climate data, let academia handle it. But academia can't launch rockets. Universities aren't space agencies. This means NASA's role as a science producer could be seriously gutted. Let's say we actually went. We landed, planted a flag on Mars, took some photos. But building a sustainable base turned out to be impossible. And for the sake of that trip, we canceled every other science program. What we'd be left with isn't a humanity that reached Mars. It's a world that lost its space infrastructure. Because you can't help but think about it. Why are we going? To explore? Then robotic missions make far more sense. Voyager, Cassini, New Horizons made incredible discoveries and cost almost nothing compared to crewed missions. Through all of this, the astronauts have done nothing wrong. Of course, they're incredible people doing their job. But there's a strange atmosphere hanging over the whole program. Even inside NASA, many people are watching this with anxiety rather than excitement. And that's really why we told this whole story. The dream of space is a beautiful dream. Going to the moon, going to Mars, making humanity an interplanetary species, all of it is wonderful. But for that dream to mean something, just going somewhere isn't enough. The journey needs to grow our science, expand human knowledge, and push our understanding of the universe forward. Because NASA's true power isn't launching rockets. It's showing us a new reality, the soil of a new planet, the atmosphere of a new world, the fragility of our own. So, in the rush to get to Mars faster, the scientific lifelines that help us actually understand space are being cut. During the Cold War, it was about not falling behind the Soviets. Today, is it about not falling behind China or other nations? We don't know for sure. But I think you have a pretty good idea of why they're doing it. And honestly, it doesn't sit well with me. Like I said, it's important to be honest. As always, until next time, I'm glad you're here.